Here on Elevate, we're all about celebrating women in business. And if there's anything about women in business, it's that there's not enough of them. Worldwide, there are approximately 25% less women that are employed than men. So who are some of the heroes working behind the scenes to close that gap? Well, you'll meet some of them in this episode of Elevate, which starts right now.
Elevate, in association with Lift Women, inspiring female founders.
Hello and welcome to Elevate by Lift Women. I'm Jamila Jallo and it is my pleasure to be here to talk all things business with women who are making a difference. Now, of course, remember, whilst Lift Women are the presenting sponsor of today's discussion, all of the views and opinions in the following segment are, of course, our own. Now, on today's episode of Elevate, we're all about advancing female employment, especially in a world where women from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds and, of course, women of colour are at a disadvantage. Now, with that, I'm delighted to welcome my first guests today. They are Dr. Muse and Dr. Fernando, who are from iSTEM Co., the research consulting and talent sourcing company who are promoting and enabling employment for women, including women of colour, and of course women from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds into STEM jobs. They're also in the process of creating and crowdfunding their Diversity, Equity, Inclusion and Retention Jobs Board, or DEIR for short. Now, Dr. Fernando and Dr. Muse, it is a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks for joining me. Now, firstly, I'd like to hear all about iSTEM Co., and of course you guys are academics, you've got your PhDs, you're very professional women. So how did you find yourself as business founders as well?
So we both are, as you mentioned, Morley's coming from an engineering background and coming from a data science background. Entrepreneurship came very naturally in terms of really pursuing this mission that we have in front of us, because currently there is a bit of a challenge for women of color in STEM, particularly including ourselves. So we see a lot of bias in this area, and when we started, it was very less opportunities were there for women, and the importance of diversity has not been really absorbed by the Australian STEM sector. So we could see a huge gap, which is a potential gap to be filled, which is economically and in all sort of ways are really beneficial for everyone. So this is kind of a driving mechanism for us. So it's kind of a very organic, not something that planned, but converting ourselves being academics because we understand STEM, because we have studied them and we do understand the language that it speaks and the importance of it, and also what it means for Australia, for the sector. So also we identify, we have lived experience being women of color. So we really do understand the problem from all angles. So we felt like we would be the right people to kind of come up with a solution.
Absolutely. And maybe Dr. Muse, you could tell us about the DEIR jobs board, I believe, that you guys are currently creating and of course crowdfunding for.
So one of the other things that I do besides being a co-founder of iSTEM Co., I'm also a board director with Women in STEM Australia. Now, one of the things that I noticed through my STEM leadership journey was that most times when the conversation of gender equity is brought to the table, it stops at gender without proper delve into the unique intersection of gender, which involves, race, ethnicity, and all these other aspects to it. Now, a lot of employers, I've engaged with a lot of employers, business leaders, CEOs, and then they always say things like women are not applying for jobs. Currently in Australia, there are only 29% of women in the entire STEM workforce. When it comes to engineering, it's even worse, 11%. Construction, still around that margin. But what's very interesting to note is that 56% of university qualified females in STEM are actually Australian women born overseas, but they face over 4 times higher unemployment rates. However, a lot of employers say, we don't know where to find women. Women are not applying for these jobs. But the women are saying, we're applying, but you're not, giving us the opportunities. So we decided to put that puzzle to rest. And that's how the concept of DEIR came about. So DEIR is diversity, equity, inclusion, and retention. So essentially the message that we have is simple and it's clear. We are daring employers to DEIR.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, on the topic of STEM, for those that don't know, it's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Now, we've heard a lot about the skills shortage, particularly in the STEM sector. Now, I believe, would this indicate that there's more opportunities for women to get employed into the STEM sector, or is it deeper than that?
Of course, there are a lot of opportunities because that's something, the opportunities in STEM, which is actual real opportunities. Apart from that, like people trying to get new qualified people from overseas, of course, that's needed. But there are, like as Morley highlighted, the unemployment rates. So there are women over here. There are also men and women both here. We are either employed in different other sectors or unemployed. Right. So there are so much potential with the current women of color into absorb into the STEM sector. And something that is very important that we need to highlight, this is not just like a social cause. This is where the money is, because not just for STEM, in all sectors, diversity is one of the key things for innovation, and that's so critical for the STEM sector. So if you wanted to produce something which absorb for the like to Australia or even to the world, we really need to be innovative in our approaches, right? There is no time to fail and trial and do all of that, right? So we having such a multicultural community, that the research says, with having a full multicultural representation within your board directors or teams, you can increase the profit by 35%. So it's where the money is for everyone. Yeah.
But, just to add on top of what Dr. Fernando said, in 2019, we identified that there are over 200,000 vacant roles in STEM. And it's interesting because with the pandemic, we know that number would have since increased. And now when it relates to like having that number of vacant roles and then seeing the number of migrant population that do have the skills, I really liked the fact that during this Jobs and Skills Summit, the government was really progressive in terms of getting more migrant workers in to address the skills shortage. However, we have to also note that, while trying to get more migrants in to address this problem, we have to think about creating opportunities for the ones already here. I go out every day. I'm sure you would too, like maybe do a little investigation, get into an Uber and try to have a chat with the Uber driver or the taxi driver. You probably find that they are a skilled migrant worker, like doing taxi jobs, Uber, disability, aged care. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. We need that, and there's dignity in every kind of labor. We need every worker is important. However, if we do have like a skill shortage for engineering jobs, for tech jobs, for science jobs, and then we have the capacity of people to fill these roles, but they're not doing it because employers are not being open-minded to absorb them, then that's a problem. And, we need to understand that getting women into work, like Dr. Fernando said, is a profitable thing to do. In fact, there are statistics that show that the Australian economy would improve by $25 billion if more women are supported into work. So it's not just a charitable thing to do, and it's not just a good social cause. It's
the smart thing to do.
Exactly. It's where it's the profitable thing to do.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Dr. Fernando, Dr. Muse, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you and touch on this very important and deep topic. So thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you
for having us.
On to my next guest now, who joins me from Work 180, the global jobs platform that is raising workforce standards for women so that they can choose an endorsed workplace where they know they can elevate and thrive. And with that, it's my pleasure to welcome Work 180 co-founder Valeria Ignatieva. Valeria, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now, tell us about yourself and Work 180 and, of course, how you found yourself becoming a founder of this company.
Sure. So as you can probably imagine, the most passionate projects stem from a personal experience. So for myself, I am a single mum. My son has a disability, and back when I was trying to get back into the workforce, so probably 15 years ago, it was very difficult to find a workplace that would support women. Things like flexible working, paid parental leave, that pretty much didn't exist. So I found myself really coming across lots of barriers to join the workforce, and also found some really supportive employees along the way. So when I met my co-founder, who was also experiencing her own challenges working in the tech industry, we came up with this idea of let's find somewhere, let's have a place where women can actually explore employers and find out all the difficult questions that they may not want to ask in an interview up front, do their research and feel empowered when they apply. So we are collecting employers on the platform that meet a certain criteria for gender equity, and women can see for themselves everything that's available in terms of things like flexible working, pay equity, career development, things that, I didn't have for myself back then, and things that many women still struggle to find these days.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to endorsing an employer, what sort of things do you look for, and what is important for employers to consider in order to get the Work 180 badge?
Absolutely. So our minimum benchmark looks at things like paid parental leave on top of government entitlements. So we look for a minimum of 6 weeks paid parental leave. We also look for no more than a 12-month waiting period to access that paid parental leave, and the opportunity to discuss flexible working arrangements at interview stage. And I don't know if this will surprise you, but around 50% of employers who apply to work with us actually fall short of meeting that benchmark.
Wow. Yeah, wow. Now, I understand that it could take over 100 years to close the gender pay gap. Now, what sort of things need to be done, not only at an employer level, but I suppose at an institutional level as well, in order to get to closing that gap on time?
This is a whole big topic in itself, but if I could
Yeah.
share some quick wins that we recommend employers look at, simple things like the number one thing that women tell us they really need to see on job ads is a salary range. So putting that on job ads would really help women understand, invest their time as well, whether or not they apply for a role. Things like not asking what your previous salary is at interviews is also something that a lot of progressive employers are banning. So there's just a couple of quick wins that employers should consider to really, help close that gap.
Valeria, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge on the show today, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Some incredible women on today's episode of Elevate by Lift Women. Thanks for watching. I'm Jamila Jallo, and we'll see you again soon.